Humberto, thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's an honor to have you here. Initially, when I was getting prepared to do this panel, I have some thoughts about doing it. And when I started asking a lot of people what the DDEC does, I had very different answers. So why not start of what the DDEC does?
Okay. So let me introduce myself first. And so my name is Humberto Mercader. I'm the Deputy Secretary in the Department of Economic Development. What is DDEC? What is the Department of Economic Development? That is the main agency of the government responsible for promoting policy related to economic development, but also implementing those policies. It has become a one-stop shop for businesses, both foreign businesses as well as local businesses and investors, to basically establish their operations and grow. So under the DDEC umbrella, which is a huge umbrella that was consolidated in 2019, it has gone through various consolidations, but the latest one being 2019. Now the DDEC has the permits office, the incentives office, it has the workforce development office, it has the public policy for energy office. Now under its umbrella, it's also PRITCO. PRITCO is an industrial buildings, basically real estate arm of Department of Economic Development. So as you know, with all of those, it has all of the what used to be Comercio Exportación, which was export and entrepreneurship. That's also a program that was consolidated. So as you can see, basically you have everything that an entrepreneur or a business needs to establish their operations, but also to grow their operations.
So you're basically the engine of Puerto Rico's economy.
I don't want to put it that way, but I like to say the private sector is the engine of Puerto Rico's economy. We try to facilitate.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about what has been Puerto Rico's economy like maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago and how that has been evolving. So let's talk about the transition from being a traditional manufacturing hub and how that's changing and how the DDEC is managing that. Sure.
So Puerto Rico had very, very, very attractive tax regime under 936. This comes from the 70s policy that was established at the U.S. Congress that gave a benefit for foreign manufacturing to be in Puerto Rico. It started with intensive labor manufacturing, not super sophisticated, but one that really created a lot of jobs and forced the academic world to create programs, to develop programs that adapted to that industry. That kind of evolved into what we have now, which is a very, I would say, sophisticated bioscience manufacturing industry. We still have manufacturing of electronic components, chemicals, etc. But really the biggest force of that manufacturing bulk is really medical devices, biopharmaceuticals, biologics, small molecules, etc. However, those benefits, those tax benefits went away, right? So we had to rethink our strategy. And now, even though we still have an attractive tax regime for those operations to be here, we need to think about what's the next phase of that economy, right? And in our eyes is services. Is how can you become a service hub, right? I think we all recognize the Puerto Rico market is too small to sustain industries to serve the Puerto Rico market. So our emphasis is how do we create industries, knowledge-based industries that serve the globe, basically, right? The global economy. And for that, there are many things that you have to do in terms of policy, but what we believe is really the number one key aspect to develop that is really talent. Is really investing in developing the right talent that one can serve as a magnet for companies to come to Puerto Rico, but also to create the new entrepreneurs in these types of industries.
Are there any particular strategies that the DDECs are implemented to address those particular industries?
I think there are many that have been implemented in the past 10, 15 years. I think To start off, I think it was Act 73, brought what's the R&D tax credit, the research and development tax credit, which was aimed at really incentivizing knowledge-based services, right, or products, right, the development of those. Later on, right now, how we're thinking about it, also Act 20, which was the export law, so really thinking about not just if even for manufacturing companies, if international manufacturing companies that are here, how can we bring their back office services, right? All of their finances, accounting, all of that. And what we've seen in that law specifically is it's been great, right? We've seen a growth that it's really, you can see it everywhere, not just on those in the manufacturing space. You've seen it because you've seen the auxiliary services that they brought, but also a lot of companies that are coming here to do services, to export services. So another very important aspect of the strategy is we need to promote Puerto Rico as an innovation hub, right? We need to do a better job of promoting Puerto Rico with a consistent strategy. And that's when Puerto Rico it was enacted by law, created Invest Puerto Rico, which now serves as the main promotional arm of Puerto Rico, right? And I think it's been super successful in maintaining an image of Puerto Rico, right? I think everyone recognizes that government changes very often, right? And policy changes and strategies change. But if you keep that out of the government and you have a private entity that does and executes that gives certain, certainty, sustainability, and I think that is really what we're seeing right now. And I think the third element, and with that I'll let you keep the conversation, but the third element is really talent. We're doubling down on a tech talent strategy because we understand that it's going to be one of the main levers of growth for the next 10, 20 years. And we launched this year what's a program called the 21st Century Tech Force, which was a government investment in the educational landscape to really duplicate the tech talent that we're producing, both at the higher ed space, but also the investments that we're doing in the K-12 space. The governor signed an executive order, I want to say about 2 months ago, that mandates the Department of Education to implement a requirement for all students coming into high school in 2024 of at least one computer science course. So, we're from the Department of Economic Development, we're pushing the educational landscape to really evolve and invest in what we believe are going to be the skills that will make us a differentiator in the world.
I think you just addressed part of my next question. So there's no doubt that Puerto Rico has world-class incentives. They're robust, but we do have some challenges. And how can we keep competitive in a global market? How do we manage and address those?
That's a great question. The one that when I came into my role in 2021, I was like, okay, what are we going to do? Incentives cannot be the only thing, right? And I think for small islands, small markets like us, taxes, incentives will always be relevant. And you can look at at benchmarks, right? Ireland, Singapore, all of those have very attractive tax regimes, and that will continue to be important for Puerto Rico. However, the investment that needs to go into the foundational elements of a competitive jurisdiction need to be there. So one of them, I also mentioned talent. Obviously, that's that. The second one, which we're very bullish right now, is with research and development capabilities. I think the R&D tax credit was the first step, but the second step is how do you build facilities? How do you build infrastructure that will sustain that over time, right? Because if the credit is for a company, but you need institutions in this case in Puerto Rico that can promote and can continue to do the R&D that will lead to new companies, new startups, spin-offs, etc. So that's another big element. The third one, which I know it's a big opportunity for us, is really the ease of doing business, which I as a government official, I recognize that is certainly an opportunity that we need to improve. And actually, next week we have an announcement that I want to think is going to be very good for the permitting system. From our perspective, the permitting process needs to be revamped completely, and we're taking small steps to do that, and next week is going to be one of them that we're announcing. But again, the ease of doing business in general needs to be very, it's super important for that. I think another element of that, which is kind of under the ease of doing business, is just taxes in general, not just for foreign investors, but for the local companies. The legislature approved a bill that hopefully is going to be a tax cut for basically every business in Puerto Rico and individuals, because you cannot have, when you compare jurisdictions, you cannot have in the table Puerto Rico be the number one in terms of corporate income tax, right? Right now it's 36, if I'm not mistaken. So that's another step that we're trying to take. Obviously, there are challenges there with fiscal neutrality and all of that, but I feel those things can be foundational to make Puerto Rico competitive aside from just incentives.
Now that we're talking about incentives, yesterday we had a conversation about Act 60, but particularly about what Act 22, the Individuals Actors Act. I hear a lot about, is it working, is it not working, could it be better? Are you guys measuring the effects? And I know I heard there's a report about it. Do you care to share that?
Sure. Yes. Let me acknowledge something. The data in government, the data infrastructure has its challenges. Lack of investment for many years. Now I think we're improving a lot in being able to obtain real data, updated data fast and efficiently. So it took us a while to get this report. It hasn't been published yet. We're going through the steps of showing them to the internal stakeholders. But what we did there is really analyze all of the incentives programs and the impact they've had on the economy, and not just the economy, but also on the government side. On the government side, so how those tax collections have compared to the investment or the opportunity cost of not collecting those taxes, right? Of the preferential tax rates. When we talk about Act 20, Act 22. Purely in numbers, they're really good programs for Puerto Rico. We're talking about almost $60 million that the government collects in taxes from Act 22, and from Act 20, we're talking about almost $200 million. So, when you think about $350 million, it's a lot of money on an annual basis, and that is the impact that these laws have had on the Puerto Rico government. But that doesn't even include the jobs that have been created, right? And the level of businesses that we estimate that around 50% of Act 22s have a business operation in Puerto Rico, right? Creating jobs, exporting services, because those 50% are in export services. So, again, incentives is always going to be a controversial topic. Ideologically speaking, it is, and it's fine. We can have the discussion, but when you look at the data, pure data, you cannot argue that those are bad programs. And at the end of the day, what I tell everyone is, people say, why 0%? And I'm like, okay, it could be 1, 2, whatever you want, but at the end of the day, if you don't have those people here, it's 0 out of, if you have 30%, it's going to be 0, right? So at the end of the day, you want to bring a community of entrepreneurs, innovators, and that's what I like to say to people. Puerto Rico needs more people. Puerto Ricans, Americans, Europeans, we need people. We need people to come here and work. We need people here to come and bring businesses. And again, it can be a controversial topic, but I like to be in the right side of history, right? And look at every country that has done this, that have evolved economically. They've brought different people to their country to contribute, right? To build businesses, to innovate. So yes, to answer the question shortly, I think they're great programs. We'll be sharing soon that report with that details the impact on many of the programs that Act 60 have, because people think Act 60 is just Act 22 and Act 20. It's way more than that.
You just mentioned something that it doesn't matter where the capital comes. If you're coming to Puerto Rico and looking to invest, it's important and it's valuable for the island. However, and I acknowledge my bias, we have almost half of the Puerto Ricans living in the States. and we did not discuss this previously, so I'm going to put you on the spot. We have a low hanging fruit of a lot of people in the diaspora. I think they're there. They want to come here, and there's some restrictions on some of the incentives. How can we fix that? We have lost population in the last decade. We have to revert that, and we have a solution that it's very near. How can we fix that with the current tax incentives that we have in place?
Yeah. So in the tax reform that I spoke about, there is a proposal to make basically the benefit of Act 22 for everyone. However, whoever designed the law in 2008, 2009 had this requirement of not living in Puerto Rico from 2006 to 2012. I think we should change that. I think it should be like a rolling basis. And if you haven't lived in Puerto Rico for the last 10 years, you should benefit from it. If you are Puerto Rican, if you're no matter what. But today, Puerto Ricans have benefit from the law because they qualified. They didn't live in Puerto Rico from 2006 to 2012. However, I think that the topic of bringing the diaspora back is certainly top of mind for us. I see Isabel here. We had from Comprometidos, we had a work session yesterday because we're thinking about it. The Secretary, Manolo Sidre, really wants to do an investment to build something that's attractive to bring back diaspora. And that means both for local employers to be employed locally, but also for remote working, to enable remote working in Puerto Rico, which has its challenges in terms of like regulations, the taxes and labor laws and all of that. But we're trying to figure out what the right model is to enable that, because that would open the door for many Puerto Ricans to just come here and keep working wherever they are, right? But still be here with their families, paying taxes here, spending money here, revitalizing the economy.
As it pertains to Act 22, there's been a rumor, not sure where the government is with this, that they're going to implement for a particular level of investment for new decrees. Where is that?
Well, the law that was passed doesn't include that. So you can be certain that that's not going to happen at least in the next year and until the end of 2024. We'll see what happens in the elections. But hopefully for the next 6 years, we won't see any change like that. I think the governors and what he's talked about and what even the legislature have talked about is give the same benefit to Puerto Ricans, right?
And just going back to the diaspora, do you actually have a breakdown of how many people from the diaspora have benefited from Act 22?
No. The data is there. Actually, it's public.
I'm curious to see how many people were actually.
But the data is public. You can find it in DDEC.pr.gov. We have all of the beneficiaries from all the incentives laws, and you'll see their name. Obviously, we have some other Latin American names that you could think they're Puerto Rican. It's hard to say, right? The same happens with Act 20, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing if they're Puerto Ricans or not, it's hard. We estimate around 40% of owners of Act 20 are Puerto Ricans, but there are a good group of Puerto Ricans in the Act 22.
I'm gonna put you on the spot again. Since yesterday with Carlos Fontan and yourself, you speak about the benefits of all the Act 60 incentives, and they sound great. However, are you guys being able to manage the pipeline of decrees, and are they being approved adequately?
The answer 2 years ago was no. I think today it has changed because of many initiatives. One, we've doubled the amount of personnel in the incentives office in the last year. That was thanks to Carlos pushing and the governor helped us get the allocation of budget to increase the personnel there. That's one. Two, we're very close to implementing the certified professional program, which I'm not gonna say much because we're still in the works on creating the regulation, how it will work. everything, but the idea will be to implement similar to what we have in permits, that we have it's like a certified professional that certifies the permit, an engineer or an architect. We want to do something very similar with the decrees. So we're working on the how to implement it and how it will look like before announcing anything. But that's coming as well, and we believe that with that, we will reduce by a lot the amount of time to wait for a decree.
So before I open the floor to questions, one last one I want to wrap up with you. In your opinion, of all the acts, which one do you think have the potential to become the most disruptive in the benefit of Puerto Rico's economy?
The acts you said?
Of all the acts between Act 60, there's I think there's 300 pages. I don't know how many. I lost track of it. Which ones do you think should be the ones that we should be leading the way with?
I'm very bullish on the R&D tax credit because I think I have compared similar credits around the world. Nothing as what we have. I think we have a super interesting incentive to promote the activity that we want to promote, right? Which is sophisticated research and development, right? The next drugs, the next software, and I think that will help us attract. If we lead the way speaking about Puerto Rico with that, I think it will help us attract a lot of people that are, the really smart people creating the new stuff that will innovate different industries.
Thank you. So this is your opportunity to ask directly Humberto any questions regarding the programs and incentives in Puerto Rico. Any questions?
Or anything else.
Brian?
That's not fair.
I think it's totally fair. So I actually don't have a question on the incentives. I would love if you're able to expound more on what is DDEC or the government in general doing to make business easier just across the board. Because that's a huge obstacle, especially for young entrepreneurs or anyone on a budget or anything like that. And it's just a pain. So what are actual steps, and will anything actually happen between now and the end of next year when elections happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a fair question. The one thing that I mentioned, we're integrating a lot of we're basically we built a new system for permits that we're doing a migration. We integrated AI. We integrated the system with Hacienda, which is big for validating a lot of documents. We integrated with PRITS, which has Ideal, which Ideal is like the main portal that can see documents from a citizen or a business from all of the different agencies, and we're launching with that next week. So it's a big launch. I shouldn't be here. I should be in the war room that we have coordinating that, because it's taking a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of investment. The idea is to validate electronically a lot of the things that you do in your permit process in a way that no one from the permit office needs to see it, as long as it complies with X, Y, and Z, right? So let's say you want to build a cafeteria in a place that it used to have a cafeteria before. No one should evaluate that. That's an automatic permit, right? It should be, as long as you have, your the fire department or the firemen go do the inspection, but that happens after, right? That can happen after. So that will happen next week. Hopefully, what we have a roadmap, an entire roadmap of additional products. That's how we call it, products that we'll be adding to that platform. We started with the permiso único and permiso de construcción, what we call it, sencillos, right? The ones that don't need a lot of evaluation, don't need discretion, because they're very straightforward. It complies, boom, 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 you have the permit. So we're starting with that. Again, early next year, we have phase 2 already planned, and hopefully that has a good impact. I know there are many other things that need to happen, and we're aware we have, but implementing stuff in government, it's not as easy, and we need to focus, right? So our focus right now is permits.
Just one last thing. How can we or everyone here help you help us? What would be beneficial from the community that would help DDEC do its job better?
Great question. I think a lot of times it's narrative, changing the narrative, and being involved, getting involved. Not in an operational way. That's always hard. It's like a lot of people say, "Hey, how can we help?" You know, you can come to the office and try to. It's not as easy to integrate someone in operationally to do something. But when you're in government, you have to learn to do 100 things at a time, right? I always tell my wife I need to change channels every couple minutes. One call is about permits, one call is about incentives, another one is because an employee did some, it is 100 things. And sometimes, and the other thing that impacts us a lot is public perception, narratives, because you have to react. People, the press is expecting you to react. Everyone expects you to react, and narratives on what's really happening helps a lot in taking weight out of us. So I think, maybe it may not be the best answer, but I again, that's what I think it adds value.
Humberto, I know you got to run for another meeting, so thank you for your candor and your time.